So here we are at the pile to talk about a couple of important things to have handy. So one of them is you always want to have water nearby. You always want to have a hose so you can keep your pile moist. Moisture is a really important piece of it. So when you build your pile, do it near a water source. As you can see, this pile is covered. You can get really creative about your coverings. This is an old horse blanket, an old horse raincoat, which works really good. This is an old tarp. Sometimes when you have multiple covers, it can make it easier for covering and uncovering the finished part and the active part. Be careful when you uncover it because there could be critters, like there's a bunch of ants here, so be careful about that. Just be mindful of it. And the importance of covers is you want to keep the moisture in. So when it's hot, you don't want your pile to dry out from the heat. And when it's raining, you want to keep the pile covered so that you don't leach out all the nutrients. You don't want the pile to get over wet and then it will go anaerobic.
Okay, so my name is Mary and this is my compost pile. And Kristen is also talking to us and helping us to understand what this is. She's pulling off the tarps, these tarps that keep the rain out and keep it from drying out. What I've added in here, and this is the fresh end, that's the old end, so I keep adding on in a linear fashion and then later harvest from that end. So I have horse manure, and that's the majority of this, which is quite a blessing. I have a garden. These are the old corn stalks. And in spring, which is when this whole thing started, I had wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of weeds. And because I have a hot pile that will burn these weed seeds, I'm adding weeds gone to seed. So I've got foxtails, cat tails from the pond. These are the yellow dock gone to seed, the sock burrs, everything. Lots of stuff in here. Okay, so in order to show you what went into this, and it was a phenomenal amount of weeds, we're going to show you slides of me pulling in wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of stuff.
So here we are at the fresh end of the pile. So I'm going to give you a little tour of the pile from the newest, youngest end of the pile down to the finished end down there. So I'm just going to kind of look at what we have. We've got, I'm seeing, this is Mary's pile, so I don't really know this pile that well. I'm seeing pine needles. Here's some even pine cones. Of course, the corn stalks. I'm seeing some weeds in here, some little euphorbias, and lots of horse manure. I'm seeing, chopped up sticks that look like they maybe have been through and have been thrown back. They might have come from over there and gotten tossed back in because they're not fully broken down. Tomatillo husks. So let's see where we are with this pile. So here's the thermometer, and the temperature is reading 130 degrees. So here's how long it is. Woo, that's hot. So 130 degrees in this pile. As you can see, the horse manure has lots of fungal activity, this little white stuff on here. Lots of fungal activity here. So if we dig down in, what are we finding down here? Oh, corn cobs to go with the corn. Lots of fungal activity. And there's some sticks down there that haven't quite broken up yet. And this looks like some kitchen garbage. So that's nicely, so when you have the kitchen garbage, you always want to keep that well covered. I can see some steam coming out of here. I can feel the heat. So then there's a second thermometer over here, which is the kind of, so this is the newest, and we're moving down towards the finished. So this thermometer is reading 110. So not as hot. So this part of the pile is cooling off. The most active part is the fresh part, and then it's cooling down. And then if we continue down here, we haven't found any worms yet. It's still probably too hot for the worms. And actually this pile is looking a little dry when you get in here, because from the heat that the pile itself generates will actually dry it out. So that's kind of a good thing to recognize. Let's see, what else are we finding in here? Yeah, see, this pile could actually use some water. So this is good to see. So lots of, these are the weeds that Mary was talking about. So they haven't broken down yet. All that brown has not broken down. And then down here, we're in our finished zone. And this is staying nice and wet because it doesn't have all that thermophilic activity that's drying it out from the inside out. So it's good to dig around in your pile, just like it's good to really feel in your garden soil. Like, when do you want to water? How often do I water? Well, you don't really know. You feel the soil. How often do you need to wet your compost? Well, check your compost and find out how wet it is. Okay, so I thought we would do just a little bit of diagnostic on this pile, because we're all learning. We always are learning. So when I dig down into this finished part, I see that there's still quite a bit of, it gets dry when I get down in there. If you can see this more dry, still quite wet, and warm actually. So it's not as dry as I thought. Yeah, it's actually quite wet. So even though it's got all this fungal activity, it's still pretty wet. I thought it was dry, but I was wrong. So these kind of things in the finished end can get tossed back into the active end. So things like that we turned up like this, these can all go back up there to go through the pile again. And then you can see this, that Mary probably should have chopped these up better. They would break down better. The smaller the particles, the more surface area there is for them to break up. So these need to be maybe cut into thirds or quarters, and then again tossed back here. So when we dug down in here, I had trouble getting down in here, and this is dry. And it's also full of sticks that I can't even, so they're trying to turn this, that's a little big. So I would suggest that things get cut up just a little bit more. If you have a tractor, you can definitely turn this easier and those big things won't be an issue. But if you're turning by hand, or trying to even dig into it by hand and not turning it, things cut up a little bit better would be better. And then same with this. These could be cut up a little bit more. These could get chopped up a little bit more. These could also be fed to the ducks and chickens first. in that pre-composting by feeding to livestock thing. So here was a fun experiment. I don't know if anybody's seen any of our past workshops, but we've talked about the tidy whitey experiment where they buried men's underwear. So Mary decided to do her own experiment. So she picked up a pair of jeans, used them well, from the thrift store, used them well, and decided they were pretty much at the end of their life. They looked kind of like this, and buried them in her compost pile. So this is what was left. So the moral of this story here, I think this is the waistband. There we go. The moral of this story is that only organic things decompose, no plastics. So these jeans are 100% cotton, but look what didn't decompose are the pockets, the thread, and funnily the tag that says 100% cotton.
Okay, so the big question we get is how long does it take? The first point there is that the longer it takes, the higher quality you have, so that may not be exactly the right question. The commercial compost is done quickly and has lower quality, but all the different microbes operate at different temperatures and they each add value. So in this case, I'm not really turning it. I'm letting it heat up. It starts to cure here. I have to take remedial action because it dried out. And then back here, long curing time. When the worms come in, that's when you want to give them time because they really give you a valuable product. So don't be in a rush. Because you're a home composter, you can have quality compost and quantity. So back here where it's doing pretty well, I think just leave it alone for several more months even. So don't be in a rush. If you are in a rush, get a tractor, turn it frequently. If you're not in a rush, let it go through these different microbial stages and take your time. Okay, so this is Mary again, and I have a lot of remedial action I need to take. I'll be moving this dried stuff back out of the pike and putting it into the hopper. That I just threw an artichoke. The business about weed seeds, I knew I was getting heat, and sustained heat of 135 to 155 is going to kill the weed seeds and pathogens. It's recommended that not everyone try this because you don't have a big pile with a big center. The stuff at the edges, like this dry stuff, did not probably reach that temperature, and it definitely needs to go back into this hot section. The size matters for creating heat. A 3 by 3 by 3 feet size compost bin is what you read about as the minimum, but the part that heats up is really only the center of that section. So 4 by 4 by 4 or an add-on long pile like this, you get a bigger weed seed cooking zone. How you do your compost is so individual, and it has to do with what you have, what materials you have, what kind of space you have, what kind of personality you have. Are you a tidy or a messy, big experimental person? It's really up to you, and you can be very creative. Okay, for additional resources, the Master Gardener website. On there, you'll see Compost is a Gardener's Best Friend. You click on that, and there's a bunch of resources. Also, you'll see YouTubes of our Zoom workshops, because now we've gone to Zoom for all our workshops, and you can see them in their entirety online. Our slideshow, in its completed 2-hour version with the speaker's notes, is on the Master Gardener website. So you can see everything, more than you can see on the Zoom workshop, which is abbreviated, and all the resources right there on the Master Gardener website. We also have a chapter in the gardening guide, which is written by Master Gardeners for this area. So coming up, zoom in to the soil building workshop. We're also doing a cool season vegetable workshop, and if you can't make it, you can check out the YouTubes online. So thank you, and remember, if you can't be a composter, be a compost supporter. That means help your gardeners with raw materials or bring in their raw materials. But as a community, we can all reduce waste and compost together.